Hey guys, welcome back. Hope everybody is having a good weekend. Let's jump right back in to Bitcoin price. And for today, I'll also do a mini lesson on technical analysis. I know I kept it pretty brief last time, but I think it might be helpful if I start going over, more in-depth technical analysis just to help you guys interpret whenever I go over these charts. So let's first start out with our usual Bitcoin daily chart. And right now the price is a little over $103,000. And today is December 15th, Sunday. So up until now, I've been talking about this local yellow trend line that I drew. And previously, I mentioned how I go about drawing these. Now, it doesn't always have to be a trend line that correlates or lines up with the lows. Sometimes we draw a trend line that coincides with the highs. So, for example, I could draw a trend line such as that. Um, but in any case, because my general sentiment is an upward price movement, this is the trend line that I prefer to draw, just to see, okay, well, is it actually going to break down, or is it simply going to retest the trend line over and over again until it breaks away from it? And the last few days, we really have not been retesting the yellow trend line. And now I wonder if we're ready to break away from this trend line. So that's what we're seeing so far. For example, if I'm retesting the trend line, then I would expect some price movement back to the yellow line, but instead, we're sort of moving away from it. And this may be a good sign because a lot of people are predicting higher prices by the end of the year. We only have about 2 weeks left in the year 2024. And it'd be very interesting to see how close to $150,000 we could get by the end of the year. Um, so it's a possibility. Now, before I move on, let's do a little mini teaching session on technical analysis. And I don't want to do too many things at once. So for today, I just want to go over candlesticks. And if you've been watching my video or following my content for the past 4 years or so, then you might always be wondering, okay, what is he actually looking at? What is a candlestick? And today I just want to take one candlestick as an example and just explain like what exactly is going on. So let's pick this one over here. And so the first thing that matters is, okay, well, what is the time frame that I'm looking at? So as you can see over here, um, 1D, and that means 1 day. And so each candlestick represents 1 day. In the case of cryptocurrency, it really means 24-hour period because, prior to the advent of cryptocurrency, when we're talking about traditional equities market and candlestick patterns, we're usually thinking about the typical hours of, 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern time, when the stock exchange opens and closes. So traditionally, that would be the candlestick that correlates, and it would have a respective opening price. So the price when the stock market opens, a closing price, and a high price and a low price, meaning the highest price for that day and the lowest price, respectively. So in the crypto market, like I said before, it's more of a 24-hour period. So on the Eastern time zone, um, at least on this chart, it's 7 p.m. to 7 p.m. And so when we take this candlestick, for example, back on December 11th. Basically, there are four components. So first, within, okay, first for a candlestick, there's a thin part and there's a wide part. So this thin part over here is called shadow, and the wide part is called the real body. And how we label this is basically you have the tip of the shadow, which, as you may have already guessed, that's the that's the lowest price for that period. Um, the top of the shadow is the highest price. And when you look at the real body, the widest part of the candlestick, basically the bottom of the real body, so, and this is the tricky part. Well, it's not all that tricky, but it's either going to be the opening or the closing price. So whenever you have a green candlestick, in this particular example, um, this is the opening price and this is the closing price, meaning for that day or that 24-hour period, the closing price was higher than the opening price, and therefore, overall, you know, simply put, it was a good day for this particular asset, and it was a green candlestick. Um, I believe the old school candlestick, and I'm sure people still use it. Sometimes you'll see a candlestick where the real body is either filled or it's empty. If it's filled, that means it's the same thing as a green candlestick. And if it's empty, it's the same thing as a red candlestick, in which case the top of the real body is going to be the opening price, and the bottom is of the real body is going to be the closing price. So meaning for that day, um, the overall price movement was negative or towards the downside. Um, and this actually, I realize it actually depends on where you are, um, depends on the market. So for some people, red is a good thing, and at least what I'm used to in the U.S. markets, green is considered quote unquote a good thing. Um, I suppose if you have a long position, but that's also another story. So I'm more referring to like long versus short. In any case, so just remember you have the shadows and then you have the real body. For a green candlestick, if you're in a long position and you want the price to be going up for that day for it to be a good day for you, correct? So let's say that green is a good thing for you. Well, the opening price is going to be on the bottom and the closing price is going to be on top. So then why do you have, the shadows outside of the real body? Well, if you think about it, I mean, this could have been the opening price, and throughout the day, maybe it went down all the way down here. Throughout the day, maybe it hit a high of over here, and then eventually it closed somewhere here. And you can also look at this more specifically, of course, looking at the numerical value. So for here, you can see that if you hover over O, so 96,658, that was the opening price, had a high of 101,961, had a low price of 95,725, and a closing price of $101,201 for a positive 4.71% increase. So anyways, that's how you look at each candlestick. Okay, and more on this later when we talk about, okay, well, what do these patterns mean? How is this different from that? Or, you have different patterns, so to speak. Let's move on to Bitcoin dominance quickly. So overall, continues to go up right now, a little over 57%. Um, I mean, what you're seeing is an increase in Bitcoin price and Bitcoin dominance. So, I mean, it's possible that people are selling altcoin on the side, but I think it's more realistic to say, well, if there's a positive correlation between the two, then people are more likely buying more Bitcoin, which is not all that surprising. People are probably reading more about it, they're taking more interest. Large institutions are probably adding more to their balance sheet, and that's probably what we're seeing. Next, I just want to, so today maybe I won't talk about meme coins. I just want to go back to Vectorspace Biosciences quickly before I wrap up for today, because I don't want to make these videos too long and tedious. But I did want to make a point here. So um, last time we were talking about this run up to 70 cents and then retesting this horizontal resistance of 62 cents. Now, this is a little bit different from the yellow trend line that I've shown on the Bitcoin chart. So the trend lines can come in all different shapes and forms. So usually I deal with linear trend lines. Um, and in this case, it's a horizontal trend line. Um, I can simply draw another one that, looks something like that perhaps. But, um, in this case, the horizontal trend line has been, pretty consistent with the price movement. So you do have to play around with it a little bit. In my humble opinion, it's not an exact science, although you do get a feel for it with experience. So I mean, this trend line is fair. I don't usually like setting my trend line to a shadow. I'll try to see if I can correlate with the real bodies. But this one did break out from whatever trend line this would have been. So right now I'm trying to rely more on the horizontal resistance. And as you can see, the real bodies, ended up opening and closing around this support line, if you will, and now starting to go back up. In fact, this most recent one opened and probably should close above the 62-cent support line. So that would be very ideal. And you can also tell from the MACD that, um, you know, I might even call this a potential, like basically like a bear trap, excuse me. So if somebody's utilizing these trend lines and also, the MECD, they might say, okay, well, it broke down below this support line. In fact, you know, it actually closed below the previous support line. So, of course, that would make it a resistance line. And, the MACD looked like it was about to cross. So, some people might have sold on this candle, fearing a further breakdown to the bottom. But in fact, it was a trap and it ended up bouncing back, which is good. And, of course, like I said before, my goal is not to swing trade like this, at least during this bull cycle. I'm really going to wait until I see a series of indications for which, that's going to be a signal for me to sell my altcoins altogether. And right now, we're only hovering in the 70-cent range. Like I said before, my ultimate goal and hope is for VXV to climb all the way back into the $15 range. And that is my ultimate goal with this particular project. So I'm not really stressed out with these local price movements. I mean, I've held through the 12 cent, you know, I guess this was the lowest point for this project during this bull cycle. So yeah, I've held through the 12 cent, era. Didn't sell a single, um, part of my portfolio invested in Vectorspace Sciences. So I'm just showing you guys sort of what I'd be looking for if I was, you know, dollar cost averaging, but I'm not even buying more of this anymore. I'm just looking at the chart just to make sure that, things are going as planned. And, at least in this sort of bull market that we're actually seeing a bounce back up and not further break down to the bottom because usually that's not a really good sign, especially for a low market cap project. Um, these projects don't rug pull like meme coins would, but I mean, projects such as these go down to zero all the time, and so you do have to risk manage. I mean, what would have been my risk management strategy for this one? I mean, it would have been really hard to say. I think a lot of people sold down here. Usually, you can tell by this long shadow extending to the downside. Um, Quite unfortunate because we ended up going up 38% the next day. For me, this sounds really bad, but I probably would have just let it run to zero. Because first of all, I don't have a huge portion of my portfolio invested in this, like I said before. But I also really do believe that it'll retest the previous high. And so the overall reward to risk ratio, I mean, outweighs to such a significant proportion that even if I let it run to zero, it would have been worth it for me to actually hold on to it. In any case, let's wrap up there, and I'll come back tomorrow or the day after, covering sort of the updates on meme coins and what I'm looking for. Okay, thank you. Take care, guys. Bye.